And I was struggling a little bit in Illustrator with
Uh-huh.
the clip mask
With
because
clipping mask.
it kept giving me the inverted version of what I wanted. So like it would give me the stuff inside the square, not outside of the square.
That's what it does. A mask is like a window, an
Uh-huh.
invisible window. So you only see what's inside, not outside.
Uh-huh. And now I don't know how to do the opposite.
Ah,
Like how to cut off the stuff inside the square.
yeah. Okay. So let me show you a couple ways you might do that. You'd either have to painstakingly draw the outside shape, right? Or what you can do is draw the outside and the inside, and then we can subtract the other and then use that as a mask. So let me just show you what that actually entails here. Let me start a new. I didn't actually save what we did the last time because it just, I mean, I guess I could do this project along with you guys, but I have other things to do. All right, so let's see, file, place. Let me go ahead and place one of these axons in here, and then I'll show you. All right, axon 01. Let's try that one. Okay, I'm just gonna resize this really quickly. Not the prettiest looking thing, but we'll get it going here. Let's see, I'll move this out of the way just momentarily. I'll tell this that it needs to be like 11 inches long. There we go, wide. All right. And then let me put a tree in, and I'll put it on the top of this thing as if we couldn't put it on the bottom here. Let's see. Open. There was a recent one, tree silhouette. Let's try that. Okay. Um, I like this one. This one's a great looking tree. Could actually be a little taller and skinnier too if I wanted it to be. Happy little tree. All right. Oop, that's maybe a little too much. There we go. All right. So I know I could actually just put this behind the image layer. But for the sake of the question, what I'm going to try to do is mask the outside and leave the in or sorry, yeah, mask the outside so that we see the outside, not the inside, right? So there's several different ways of doing this, depending on which way you're thinking. Again, I have the Zoom interface sort of all around me. Let me just move this out of the way so I can see my layers here. All right. So I'm going to be working on the same layer as the tree, and I'm going to go ahead and lock this image layer so it doesn't move on me or anything. I don't accidentally slide it around. I'm just going to use the pen tool. I'm just going to, you see where this box is with black, and then, so you can change the fill color and the outline color as you draw. I'm just going to change this to something obnoxiously bright that it will contrast with everything else on the screen at the moment. Um, and one of the things I'm going to do is just simply, oh, sorry, I turned that layer off so I could see, but now let me, I'm just going to temporarily turn this tree down in opacity so I can see behind it a bit. So I can see where I'm drawing relative to the building. All right. Now, I'll go ahead and make this a nice bright web safe red or something. Let's see what's going on here. Maybe magenta. It's turning everything gray for some reason. Hmm. Well, that's weird. Let me zoom in and see what I have here. But as you can see, I can kind of snap around in places. Sometimes that's useful and other times not. Maybe my mode is in grayscale or something. Weird. Document color mode. No, RGB. It's weird. Well, anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and try to mask this as best as possible by drawing the true mask, and I can always adjust these later if I accidentally screw up something by a millimeter or two. And I'm just going around and just like that. I'm just going to go ahead and go back to that first point and close that up. So now I have a closed shape. And I'm going to go ahead and select the tree and the shape. The shape is above the tree in the hierarchy of sort of layering. And I'm going to say object, clipping mask make. So that should work. And you can see that's masking out the parts that I don't want. Um, Now, let's say it's a lot easier to just mask like you would think it would be, just to sort of take this stuff out, draw that shape. I can do that. So let's say you went painstakingly around and drew the sort of reverse mask, right? There's still a way to utilize that. So if I do this and I click around, let me just get this drawn here. Try to as much as possible anyway. You can see I'm not being very careful, as careful as I normally would be, right? But let's say I wanted to mask that part, right? What you're saying is that this is what I drew. It's the kind of the reverse mask as far as how masking works. There's a way of getting around this, right? I don't have to like redraw everything from scratch. I can utilize this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a second box around the tree, right? And let's see, I'm going to say, I'm just right clicking on this and saying arrange, send backwards just a bit here. Let's see if I can select that mask and select this at the same time. So the interior shape and the exterior shape at the same time. What I can do is I can go to object and what's it called? I'm having a hard time. It's some sort of Boolean, but they call it, what do they call it? Not a compound path. Let's see. I have to think about this just for a second. Hey, welcome, Jason. We went ahead and got started. Um,
I came to the architect building and now I'm in
ah,
the library.
yeah.
I thought we
Okay.
had class in person.
No,
So,
t tomorrow and Thursday we do. Today's just over Zoom.
okay. I need a lot of help. I really need to work on this.
Yeah. Let's see. Shape, convert to shape. I just got to find this for where did they put it? It used to be so easy to find. And in fact, the icon was pretty intuitive. I can't remember what it's even called at this moment. Let's see. Path. Maybe they put it under path. No. Maybe they put it under compound path. No. There's a way to sort of subtract this area from the small area from the large area to make a hole inside. And then you can just apply that as a mask again. So that's how I would get over this. But I'm trying to find the right tool and I don't see it, annoyingly. Let me just click here and try to figure out what the blend. Well, let me just try making it a compound path. There we go. If I make it a compound path, object, compound path make, what it's going to do is it's going to see this little island and cut that out from my mask. Okay, now I can use this. I should be able to use this as and select my tree and then make a mask. Clipping mask, make. Yeah, there we go. All right. A little convoluted, but there is a way, right?
Okay, so
And it really does boil it down into how you sort of think about this, like figure ground, negative, positive. That threw me off the first time I heard the word mask. I figured I was applying masking tape when in
yeah,
fact you're doing the exact opposite. It's the flip, it's the reverse.
I see. Okay, because I should be focusing on highlighting
The
the
places that you
box
want
that,
to see.
yeah, the thing that I want to see,
Yeah,
not what I don't want to see. Because I tried to put like people inside of like behind walls and stuff like that, and that was what I was having trouble with.
yeah. All right. Hey, Jason, just as a quick rehash, we were just talking about what everybody submitted for today and just quickly going over some things. And I want to do, I have to do some demonstrations for the next steps. But then we have the rest of today's class in the afternoon to sort of troubleshoot things. then tomorrow morning, and then also Thursday in person as well. Wednesday in person, we'll be meeting on the site in downtown. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll sort of keep everybody up to date, keep reminding as much as I remember and can think here. Um, okay. So with that, I'm just going to open up Canvas here and talk about the next steps before I start to do a quick demonstration. But I'm recording this and I'll post this so that if you need to rewatch it at all, like, hey, what did he do after this step or whatever, it's right there for you. You don't have to worry about me trying to, you don't have to wait on me to check my email. Let's see. So we'll go with light vessels, right? That's the next step here. All right, you can see, actually, I forgot to put the little caption here with the credit. I'll add that later, but a buddy of mine, super good sketcher in his sketchbook. And I said, man, like, can we include this? He doesn't live in the US. We're just acquaintances online. Because looks exactly like or similar in language to what you're looking at, minus maybe the red things, the red parts, right? I mean, doesn't that look like uncanny to like what you guys have been experimenting with? These sort of long slots for windows and openings, sort of Tetris sort of shaped pieces, sort of arranging them in planes, etc. All right. So now that you have your four planar compositions, and we're all at different sort of stages with that, so we'll work this week on getting everybody up to speed and then continuing to develop these. Let's shift gears as we evaluate and refine these. The first gear shift in our heads, instead of just calling these planar compositions now, sort of spatial compositions from planes, we'll start calling these light vessels because I think that gets to the true spirit of how I want you to begin to look at these when we start cutting sections and take perspectives on the inside of these today. So they're vessels in that they'll hold humans in a set of curated spaces. And light refers to how we want to begin to reveal interesting relationships and contrasts between surface and light. So we need to identify the more successful spatial moves across your compositions. Then we can edit, combine these into vessels. In order to see inside your planar compositions, we'll begin to cut sections and plans using a clipping plane in order to reveal the interesting spatial interlocks within your 40 by 20 by 40 volumes. So I think that's critical, right? Like now we're going to sort of, instead of just having to turn it on X-ray and guess, we're going to get inside these things and work from the inside out, okay? As we begin to sort of look at solar phenomena, light, and then sort of spatial sequencing. We will also carefully position the camera for some perspectives, and we will turn on the sun and use it to reveal and analyze a number of potential solar behaviors. First person and in perspective, you can start to see how the light changes in these spaces or projecting through the openings you make, etc. Light rays, shadow patterns, framed views of sky, etc. Okay. So we'll work our way from inside to out and then out. If you haven't considered the outside, and the examples I've been showing that I didn't really consider the outside. Some of you did. That's fine. If you haven't considered the outside of your newly coined vessels, now would be a good time to start. You can use the remaining parts from your planar composition exercise. So if you have some leftover pieces or parts, feel free to use those. Be resourceful in that way. Or you can create your own to dress your vessels in suitable vestures. So I'm using this sort of covering cloak sort of metaphor here, right? You can start to think about how do you start to custom tailor layers, plates, planes along the outside to frame views, to block sunlight where you want shade, or to create opening to let sun in where you want volumetric light rays, etc. Always continue the same aesthetic that you started with. In other words, you need to keep planar shapes with narrow, long openings, much like the example image up here. Okay. What's nice about that is that we can make openings and windows in Las Vegas in the desert, the Mojave Desert, but we have to do it responsibly. So we can't just have lots and lots of glass, right? No matter what city center shows you on the strip, it's actually environmentally irresponsible to place lots and lots of glass in the middle of a desert, right? We call that the greenhouse effect, and that if we let light through the glass and it strikes surfaces in the inside, part of that light reflects and part of it gets converted to heat and we have internal heat gain. Um, and if anybody's ever heard of the greenhouse effect, that can be really bad, particularly if, let's say, just as if you're building a glass building in the desert, it's about the same thing as being in a locked car with the windows up in the desert parking lot, right? So we don't want to do that to people. They don't like to be baked in the desert sun on the inside of a building, usually. So we do that very carefully and minimally. All right, so I'll go through the workflows today, and then we'll have the rest of the week to sort of work on them. But as far as deliverables go, what we're going to do is we're going to continue iteratively to start to produce perspectives. We get a perfect perspective set up and we save the camera position. And then we'll start to move the sun through the sky with sliders and start to take multiple perspectives. What I want to do is create a matrix or a grid of different perspectives at different types of the times of the day or year. So you can start to tell almost like a quick storyboard of how parts of your museum or parts of these light vessels begin to respond to the sun. Okay. At the same time, we'll start draft section drawings and plan drawings. And what we can do is we can actually create clipping planes and use the section tools in Rhino, set up where we want to slice plans and sections, and then then as we start to move things around, the drawings will change dynamically. Okay. So we're extracting drawings, two-dimensional drawings, sections of plans from the three-dimensional model that you guys are working on. These planar compositions, now we're shifting gears, we're calling them light vessels to sort of think a little bit about, a little bit more about light and surface and space. All right. Just like in the upcoming weeks and the last week, right? We'll have this week to sort of work through these things, work out the workflows, make sure hopefully everybody's on pace. And I can always meet with people outside of class two if need be between Thursday and Tuesday. But then Tuesday, another milestone. You'll submit what you have. We'll talk about it, and these are drafts at this point. We'll have another week or two to sort of turn these around and really develop them before we show them off to some external reviewers. Okay. All right. Um, so June 24th, that's our next Tuesday, right? A week from today. We'll look at the sort of first drafts of all of these things. And thinking about design as an iterative exercise, you show lots of stuff, and then we sort of say, okay, you need to redo that. This is perfect. This is perfect. Don't change this, and we start to sort of rearrange and do another round. Okay. So over 2 weeks, you'll start to really learn some of these workflows pretty well, I would think. All right. And then again, that's the lead up to our July 1st meeting at Assemblage Studio, one of the good architecture firms here in town. And Eric Strain and his team will meet with us and talk to us about the desert, about Las Vegas, and about our understanding of our site, and how in the study models that we're cutting sections and perspectives of, and showing axons of, etc. Right. So we'll show them the process, and then they'll give us some feedback. Okay. Just as a quick reference, the stuff I'm showing you this morning, you can also see here with this YouTube video. If for some reason something I'm doing doesn't make sense, you can always look at this. But I'm going to go over these techniques in class. But if anybody was looking ahead and they wanted to work ahead, that's where they are. Okay. All right. So that's how we're shifting gears this morning. And of course, in the afternoon, we'll talk more about taking your site models and starting to um, oh, this looks, yeah, this looks like I copied and pasted the wrong thing and instead of rewriting what I wanted to do. But anyway, I'll check that before this afternoon. We'll talk more about how we start to do a site analysis and then start to map what our understandings of the site and its surrounding area in your site models in Rhino. So yeah, my apologies on this. This looks like I accidentally overwrote something with like what we did, how I sort of said this last year. That's not good. Or no, maybe I just hit the wrong site modeling, site analysis. Oh, sorry, I just hit the wrong page. All right, so we'll talk this afternoon about some of the things that we'll talk about with our site and its area, right? Connectivity, access to public space or lack thereof, public transportation, its connectivity to public transportation, sometimes or lack thereof, amenities in the area, food and eating. Are we in a food desert? Is there housing stock around? If so, how much and where? What kinds of things can we see around there? Visual appeal, curb appeal, that has to do with also to a certain degree demographic information, crime information, things that affect property values, safety, access to sunlight, daylight, shade, and other sort of uh, environmental systems, access to views, noise. So we'll think about all the senses here, smells, whatever you want to say. The challenges of homeless population in the downtown area that affects our site. Foot traffic volume, car volume, services, this nebulous term called walkability and what that means and how certain companies measure that. And do we have really walkable communities in our city? At least, let's say maybe they're walkable at like 10 p.m. When it's dark out and some of the heat's dissipated, but maybe not at 12 p.m. So anyway, we'll talk more about how then we can start to map these things as we look at the data, as we go to visit the site and take notes, etc. Okay. So just to give you a sneak peek at what we'll continue to work on. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino, and it's just like a cooking show. I already have one of these pre-baked, so go ahead and do that. Come on, Rhino 8, sometime today. All right. Perspectives demo. Look at that. Oh, look, it's a little interior perspective. All right. Surprise. This is so painful. Like radio silence while we wait on Rhino to open here. Perspectives demo. Come on now. All right. So anytime now, this is going to open up. Just taking a minute. There we go. Okay. All right. So here's a quick interior perspective, right? You can tell this is just in one of those shaded or rendered modes. What is this doing? Cut it out. Oh, okay. I opened up multiple instances of Rhino 8. All right. Thanks, Windows and Mac OS. All right. So how did I get here? Um, Let me just turn this back to just the regular old perspective view. Let's look at it. Hold on, let me just zoom out here. For some reason, it's taking a while. All right, here we go. All right, so here's, let's say, an example of one of your planar compositions. You can see I just made a planar composition, and then I added like another plane here for some reason, probably to give some darkness. Then I made a copy of stuff, and so this is like just duplicate, sort of, just to make it a little more complicated, I guess. All right, so when you're in perspective view, right, your right mouse button sort of rotates around. If you hold down the Shift key, you can pan. If you hold down, I believe the Option or Alt key turns it into a dynamic zoom in out tool. Okay, of course, you can always just zoom in and out with your mouse button if you have a scroll wheel or something. Okay. I'm going to do several things here. One is I'm just going to pick a certain perspective view and I'm just going to start to zoom in. And in particular, I'm going to focus on the inside, right? Not that exterior perspectives aren't awesome and interesting, but I'm just going to try to get myself on the inside here a little bit. Okay. So now let me just try to walk myself back just a bit here. There we go. Somewhere in there. All right. So let me just minimize this. Zoom, pieces of zoom laying around everywhere in the way. All right. So when I have nothing selected, oftentimes this box on the right-hand side is giving me just the properties viewport box, right? It just gives me a set of properties. When I have no object selected, it's giving me the properties of the viewport that I'm looking at. So in this case, perspective view. All right. Now, if you don't see that, look for this color wheel, and that toggles on that properties box. either puts it up over here or makes it hover somewhere on your screen. Okay. And again, because I have no like surfaces or curves or anything, extrusions selected in Rhino view right now, it's only giving me the properties of the things I have selected. In this case, I have nothing selected, so it's giving me the properties of the viewport and the camera that I'm looking through to that's being displayed in the viewport. So you'll see that there's, it's the title perspective. You get the width and height of the viewport window. It's telling you that's perspective projection, right? In other words, it has vanishing points. It's how our eyes see things. Things that are closer are bigger, things that are further away disappear because we have vanishing points, right? And it's given me some camera parameters as well. So if we thought about this as looking through a DSLR or something like my Nikon, it's giving you one of these things is giving you, first of all, the location of the camera in X, Y, and Z. So that's its coordinates. But it's giving you the lens length, right? So I don't know if any of you are into photography, but the lens length is really important. Um, the higher the lens length, the further you can sort of telescopically zoom, right? Um, and and so it's all about sort of zooming in and getting a very sort of detailed view of a small area. If you decrease that lens length, then you get into wider angles, right? So it's a little counterintuitive. Lens length of, let's say, 35 millimeter, right, will actually show us more on our screen, right? Because it's going a little wider angle, right? It's lower lens length. The human eye, it's kind of estimated to somewhere between 25 and 30 millimeters, depending on how much you sort of talk about the sort of peripheral view that we have that's not quite in focus. So if we did 28 millimeters, that's sort of approximation of the human eye. If we really wanted to sort of show a tight space in a wide angle, we could start to go to 25 or maybe even 20. You can see that each time it's kind of like we're zooming out and seeing more in the same lens. Okay. But it gets wider angle. Okay. And as a result, it starts to actually distort a bit. Okay. So trying to find that sweet spot between showing off the architecture, but not distorting it so much that everything looks sort of weird and angled, is kind of one of the things that you have to do if you're a photographer, if you're ever like photographing architecture. Um, What's kind of interesting about this is I start to see layers both vertically and horizontally of planes in spaces, right? So I see that there's a sort of threshold here, there's a space back here, it looks a little larger. There's a space above me, mezzanine down over it, and I have this space over here as well. Just going to sort of zoom in here and see what I can see when I start to turn myself around a little bit here. Zoom in on this, zoom out just a bit, start to rotate around just a little more. Okay, so you can start to see some spatial interlock here. Whereas if I'm on this floor, I can start to see things mezzanines above me, but then they sort of look down onto me. I can see something up here, etc. Right? So there's some interesting things going on, right? Now, I'm not saying this is the perfect interior perspective, and I would actually probably continue to sort of move this around until I frame something up that looks really kind of, oh yeah, it's starting to get there. Right now, I start to see that I have a series of spaces, one up here that cascades down to this up over here, that cascades down to where I'm at, and then cascades down further below me, right? Kind of a really interesting set of spatial conditions without any circulation at the moment, right? But still, I think nonetheless kind of interesting. I start to see that there's an oculus to the sky up here, right? I'm starting to frame certain pieces of the sky or view side to side, etc. So if this say I wanted to take this as one of my interior perspectives, okay, I'm going to show you how to save this so that no matter how if you screw this up and accidentally drag your mouse around and you go, oh no, like what happened, right? What we're going to do is we're going to save these perspective views so that we can always refer back to them later and re-render them, change the sun position, etc. Right? So we'll identify some of these really nice views. And then what I'm going to do in the perspective viewport is I'm going to go up to the label, as we often do, right? And bring up this menu. So just as a quick reminder from last week, right? This is how we can set things from wireframe shaded, rendered, or, even our custom viewport what do you call them? Uh, our custom viewport styles, right? And we can also set view and we can say, let's turn this to the top view or bottom, right, front, or perspective or isometric. We did the isometrics last week, right? What you'll notice is that I've actually saved something called Interior Perspective O1. So I'm going to show you how you can begin to save and then find these perspective views, right? These sort of camera positions. So I'm going to click down at the bottom where it says named views. Okay. And it'll either bring it up docked in this right hand, or it might just bring up a floating box with called named views hovering in your screen. But this is where I can say camera plus save as, right? Just click that icon, little camera with the plus sign saying, I'm going to save this view. Now I'm going to name this. I already have an interior perspective O1, so I'll say interior perspective O2 and hit OK. Now you'll see that this interior perspective O2 will pop up. I can select a different one that I had, interior perspective O1, and it takes me what looks like a thumbnail, except the display mode's a little different. If I turn this to render, it'll look the same. I can go back to interior perspective O2. There it is. Okay. All right. And again, I'm just using, in some cases, um, the custom display mode that I made before. I called it, I think, in my case, I called it AAE 767, this course. The demo, it's just a simple display mode I made, combining the technical drawing and then turning on some of the render settings so that I get a little mixture of both. Okay. One other thing I want to show you is how to turn on and then adjust the sun. Okay. Because I think that's important. Once we're in here, in situ, inside this scene, I'll just go to the interior perspective over here first. Right. What I can do is I can type in the command box sun. Right. And again, it'll either toggle on the sun settings over here on the right hand side if you have everything docked here like I do. Here I have my layers, my properties, my sun, my views. Later we'll talk about materials and shaders and rendering settings, etc. Or it might just be a hovering box that you can turn on or off. You can always toggle that sun settings by just typing in sun in the command line. It brings this up. And inside of here, of course, first of all, you can say, do I want the sun on or off, right? If it's off, I just get soft shadows, diffuse light, or I can say I want a directional sunlight, right? Now it might might also have manual control turned on, where you can begin to give it very specific azimuth and altitude things with these sliders, or I can turn manual control off and I can get much more real. As we've mentioned before, I can say set my location, which is really important so it knows which latitude I'm at. And then I can begin to set time of day, time of year. Let's see. This is saying July 10th. Oddly specific, but 6. And today's the 17th. And we'll do 2025. And let's see, it's 10:43. So we'll do something like that. So what I can begin to do is I can begin to look at a time of day, and I can move this slider and start to see how the sun changes over the course of the day. And in fact, I could do this in hour or 2 hour increments. I could begin to take each of these as snapshots out. So let me just look at what all my different sort of options here. I'm going to turn on rendered with the sun. You can see that I'm starting to get a different reading here, like where the sun is. Now, it's assuming that north is up in the y-axis, so positive y-axis up in the top view, and then acting accordingly. If that's different, you don't want to rotate your model around, then you can always change where true north is by simply adjusting this. Okay. But now we're starting to sort of understand what kinds of interesting shadows and bright spots we're creating here. Right. And I could always go with just simple render mode. Or again, I could use this, where I have edges drawn and, it's a little brighter on the inside and start to see a little more here and there. Right? And again, I've saved my camera view, so I can always come back to this and start to adjust the date and time. Let's say I go to December now, to the shortest day of the year, but the sun is lower in the sky, so we have more sunlight penetration in areas and certain areas. You can start to see that the environment's a lot different in the wintertime. So you can begin to do a series of these where you start to show, and then arrange into a grid, start to show, let's say this grand hall that I have here and what it looks like in winter compared to summertime, versus let's say September or March in the spring, the swing seasons, right? Right. And then we can start to make decisions on, is there too much brightness? Is there not enough? Is it too dark? Is it too bright? Or do we want to align this opening with, let's say, due east, so that everybody that's here at sunrise on March 21st can like see the sun like like Stonehenge, like it's lined up with that opening and sort of framed for the perfect Instagram snapshot story or something, right? So, you can begin to have fun with this, is what I would argue, like getting inside these things that you've created and starting to sort of understand how you can massage them. Not make major changes, but can start to sort of adjust based off of these things. And then to take these perspectives and arrange them as a little storyboard to tell that story, to show, like, here's how I'm making design decisions. It's based literally on solar events and my readings of them and how to and how to perfectly line up sun rays at a particular time, or to cast these shadows that are really interesting, etc. Okay. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you guys this morning, how to set up some perspectives, how to adjust that camera lens length so you can start to see on the inside in more satisfactory ways. Let me just go back. Now you can see I can go back to my saved views. Let's do that new one that I just started. And I can go back to the sun now, and I'm going to start to change the sun's position throughout the day and start to see what kinds of things I have here. And what I might start to see is that in the afternoon, I have way too much light in here, and I need to start actually adding cladding to the outside, right? In other words, light isn't that special unless there's some dark to contrast with, right? There's shadow, right? So trying to understand that and can be, I think, really helpful. And light can be great if you can sort of bounce it in and diffuse it before it comes into the building. But if it's direct sunlight, again, we get that direct sunlight hitting the surfaces on the inside of the building. A substantial portion of that light gets dissipated as heat, gets converted to heat, and then we have internal heat gain, and then we have really uncomfortably hot spaces. So again, thinking about how we sort of thread the needle and sort of weigh and balance these things, measure the trade-offs, right? This is a way for us to show how these things actually work. So when somebody says, "Oh, that looks like a really big opening to the west," and you go, it only really matters except on this one day, and here's why it's so special, right? And you can start to explain, tell this story, defend your design decisions. So I think that's really important. Okay. Now I'm going to show one more workflow since we're recording. And it won't take the whole time, so then we'll have some time for some questions and to sort of work through these things a little more. Okay. But I'm going to open up basically the same model file, but with the slight changes in that I haven't been saving perspectives in this one, but I have been cutting sections. Okay. And I'll show you what this looks like and then how it works and how you can do it at home or at your laptop. Let's see here. All right. Interestingly, right, this is usually the right view. And because of the direction I was cutting the section, I changed it to the left view. So I could sort of see the section cut and then see what's beyond or inside. But here you can see the same model, but it's actually cut in section and clipped so that we can see inside, right? So here's another way of sort of showing that section drawing. This is called a section perspective. We're just in perspective mode, and then we're clipping part of the building away and it disappears so we can see it inside as a cross section. And then I've actually made some settings to sort of show where things are actually being cut with the hatch. I'll change that and we'll adjust those properties. We've also beefed up the line weight around the parts that are being cut, the mask, the poché. Okay. And we've turned on the sun and lighting. But we can also have this dynamic section drawing generated in 2D, right? So now we can sort of see the exact same things where the building is being cut. The line weights aren't showing up here all that well or anything. And we can see the surfaces and openings beyond, etc. Okay. All right. So let me just show you how we got there. Just going to turn it to rendered really quickly. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that section cut and start with a blank slate here. Oh yeah, look at that. Now, for whatever reason, I have like this sort of plinth here. I'm just going to fix this really quickly. I'm just going to take this poly surface and I'm just going to move it up slightly so that the building isn't like floating or something. This really weird situation here. Building looks like it's kind of floating when I cut it in section. All right. But what I've done is I've actually extruded the ground surface into something thicker, sort of reflecting the idea that, the ground is thick. It's really deep, right? And this is just a basic render mode, right? This is rendered with the sun on. Right? You can see the sun is on. Just turn it this way a little bit. There we are. Okay, so I'm just going to go to all 4 views and sort of zoom out so I can see everything all at once in all my viewports. Okay, so I have top, front, in this case, left, and interior perspective. And so here's where I'm going to use the drafting pull-down menu. In the sections option, I'm sort of holding my cursor over these, and I'm going to say create. All right. So I'm going to create a section slice. Right. Drafting pull down, then to the sections, and then out from that option, you get another sort of menu here. I'm just going to say create. Now it's going to say select all the objects to cut in this section. Instead of trying to drag a box around everything, I just want to select everything all at once and cut everything in section. I'm just going to hit enter for all. Okay. And then it's going to say the direction is going to be X. Is that okay? And you can see the direction that it's going to slice the section. We're looking at a plane in top view from above, so we're looking at it as a line. And you can see the arrows sort of showing where we would be looking, what direction we'd be looking in. And I'm going to say, let's turn this to direction Y. Oh, there we go. Dun, dun, dun. That looks good. Let's turn my object snaps off for a minute. Disable my object snaps. Those are annoying. And what you'll see is I actually accidentally clicked and placed one right there. Let's see. Let me just do this again. Enter for all. Direction. I'm just going to switch the direction to Y just to show you it can be done, and I'll cut it in this view. For whatever reason, the plane is showing white now instead of red. I don't understand why, because it'd be so much easier to see if it was red, but I'm just going to click there. You can see that it's been placed. Okay. All right. Now, there's a plane there. You can see it in this view. You can see it in this view. You can see it in any of these views at any given time. And again, back to this properties box. So we use this properties box to change the perspective properties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this section plane, and I'm going to go back to that color wheel and look at its properties. You can see that I have clipping plane properties here. And one of the things that I can toggle on or off is, do I want the clipping plane to clip the rest of the section in which viewports, right? So right now it's just set to the top one since I drew this in top view. It's clipping in the top, but I can also say clip it in the interior in this perspective view. And voila, look at that. It's clipped. All right. And what's more is I can move this, just this clipping plane until I get just the perfect section cut, right? Like I go, oh, that's it right there. Mm-mm-mm. All right. Whew. I'm just going to go back in this perspective so we can see things three-dimensionally while we're cutting them. Sort of make a little more sense here, right? The conventions for cutting a section or a floor plan is that first of all, we prioritize walls, ground, whatever is being sort of cut through, right? And then sort of x-rayed through, right? So in this case, walls, roofs, floors, etc., the earth, even the ground is being cut through. And so that's what we would draw first. And then we would beef that up so we start to understand where are all the main sort of components and walls, sort of, what do you say, partitions, right? So we start to understand what's mass. And we poche that in, usually darker, versus, all the sort of space in between. So we can start to understand the sort of spatial logic here. Or I could say, oh, really, I think people probably enter under here, then they get released into a larger space, etc. Right? We can begin to sort of tell a larger story about the sort of volumetric variety that we have on the inside of this thing, right? We have triple high spaces and single high spaces, small spaces, large spaces, bright and dark spaces, etc. Right? When we turn the sun and light on. So there's a couple of things I'm going to do here. One is I'm going to select all my model. I'm going to deselect just by hitting Control and click that plane. And I'm going to go to the layers box here. Okay. And what you'll notice is that all of my geometry is on this one layer called model. Okay. And if I click and move to expose more of these options over here in the layers, let's see, just pull this out. One of the options, first of all, there's print width, and then there's also section style. So if I click section style, I can then begin to sort of determine what I want the stuff, the mass, right? The inside of these boxes and walls, floors and ground, how I want them to sort of be rendered, what I want them to look like. So I can give them, in this case, I gave these a hatch pattern. I said the pattern color will be black. The pattern rotation will be 45, so I'm rotating that hatch 45 degrees. The pattern scale is set to 2 from 1. The background behind, I'll just set this to something brighter so you can see it a little easier, right? And then for the boundary line work, show it. The line type, I can say custom, and let's see, continuous, round, round, round. I'm just going to look at this and go, okay. Width scale, I can beef this up so it's thicker or thinner. And then color black. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. You can see now, first of all, it doesn't matter how I move things around on my screen, right? You can see that everything that's sort of poche or filled in, right, is filled in with that custom background color, that black hatch at a 45 degree, and that the line work around it, the line weights are beefed up more than the other line weights, right? I can show you this. Oh, hold on. Let me just change here we go. Right. So even when I have regular lines and edges turned on, the cut lines I've beefed up to like 6 mm or something, like a weight of 6 or something. They're bigger, stronger, and thicker, right? So I can either think about doing a section in this sense, right? The sort of three-dimensional section perspective, right? But typically when we think about section drawings, these things are usually orthogonal drawings. And so I'll show you how to create those as well. Certainly, there's something really lovely and interesting about seeing this. And then I could start to, again, bring this out, capture to file, bring out a JPEG, TIFF, or PNG, bring that into Illustrator and start to populate with trees and silhouettes again, just like you did with your axons. let me show you how you can then take this exact same section and begin to generate the drawing, the section drawing, the orthogonal section drawing from it. Okay. So again, I'm going out to all 4 viewports here so I can see everything all at once. And I'm going to focus particularly on plan because this is where I'm going to have a flat drawing laid out on the XY plane for me. By default, it'll put these drawings, the section drawings, on that XY plane. And so top view seems like the best way to sort of view that um, sort of in the normal direction, right? So I'm going to go back to drafting again. Drafting is where we have the sections tool, right? Drafting pull down sections. And instead of creating a section cut, I can say create a section drawing, create drawing. Okay, now it's going to say, well, select the clipping section. So I'm going to select this one and hit enter. And then it's going to say, where do you want to place it? Okay, so I'm just going to place it really quickly. And you can see here I have a quick section drawing with the same parameters, it looks like, mostly. Okay. There are some display discrepancies. Sometimes the lines look like they disappear, but they're there. They are there. You can see even the ground and all its thickness is cut in section. Let's say I wanted to change some things here. I want to edit this. I'm just going to go to top view so we can see things a little bigger. Can I shrink that box, that properties layers box a little more so we can see a little more, have a little more useful screen real estate here. So I'm going to go back to drafting. Anytime I want to do something to these drawings, I go back to drafting sections. And now instead of saying create drawing, I can say edit drawing, right? I already have one created. I want to edit it. Edit, select the clipping section. There it is. And let's say we want to change the angle. I want to turn this so that it's the same as the other one, right? Let's see. So as I look at it from beyond, show solid, I could say yes or no. Show hatch, I could say yes or no, right? Do I want to say show those properties? Print width, I could say by input object, I could say by layer. I'll just do by layer. Um, add background. Watch what happens when I change this from no to yes. I'll just click on it and change it to yes. Now suddenly I get everything in elevation beyond that section cut, so behind it, right? So which is typical of what we do. We draw all the stuff behind this stuff. It's just it's less line weight and it's sort of drawn in elevation beyond, right? Okay, and I'm going to hit enter to accept. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my perspective view. We can sort of look at the difference between these two things and the similarities, right? So here we have the section perspective, and I can make this a really dynamic, sort of interesting drawing. I recommend you try both. And or we have the orthogonal section drawing that I'm just looking at in perspective view right now. Okay. All right. So if I go back to this in top view, you can see I have a drawing, and I can actually, if let's say I wanted to bring this drawing out to another Rhino file or AutoCAD or something and start to touch it up, or Illustrator, right? I can actually go back again to drafting sections, and I can say export the drawing. I can say export drawing. It says which one do you want to do? It's the one generated from this clipping section. Do you want to export sections? Yeah, like where do you want to export to? Desktop, 3DM. And then there it is, right? It basically asks like, do you want to save it in my desktop? Voila, there it is on my desktop. All right. So there's a number of different ways you can begin to explore these things. But what I would encourage you to do is try cutting that section before you even generate this drawing or anything. Cut that section, move that clipping plane around, and look at it in perspective view. It's really quite, I mean, seriously sweet. Like you can start to um I lost my train of thought. You can start to sort of open these things up and see what you have on the inside, right? And I think that's really important because that's how these things are going to be ultimately sort of judged. People are going to ask you, like, what does the inside of that look like? And you go, well, let's look at the section. You can, show them this, and they're like, oh, wow, okay. There's lots to talk about in here. Let's get started, right? Um, I mean, what's interesting is that, when I start to read this, I go, well, first of all, there's a lot of science fiction here. That's like a dramatic cantilever that wouldn't work. The horizontal surfaces, if people are going to be walking on them, there are live loads and dead loads on them. They need to be a lot thicker than the walls. And then we also need like basic supports. I would try to bring some of these surfaces down to the ground. These two surfaces right here look like they could sort of work down to the ground and become a sort of core, or maybe I could fit things in between them as a sort of, maybe there's circulation, stair, elevator, some chases to bring some systems up and down in, right? And so I can start to immediately get a sense of like the internal logic of how I can make some of these things start to work. Okay. And look, don't have to think about all those things at the beginning, but the section starts to reveal some of the moves, the further moves you can make, and how you begin to sort of understand the internal logic and how that then manifests all the way back out to the outside, right? Then when you start to change the cladding on the outside of this thing, the vesture, the envelope, the skin, the facade, whatever you want to call the sort of elevations, the outside elevations, you can start to make informed decisions on the kinds of openings, how big of an opening, where is it located in order to provide that perfect volumetric light ray streaming through, like those old photographs of Grand Central Station, um, or or how to pull back the roof from the wall so that the wall becomes a light scoop and bounces top light down indirectly into the building for nice natural daylight. Or you can start to again play these games. Section is how you do it, right? When you look at the section, you can start to see the light bounces off the ground and up and into the building. It comes from the sides, and it can also come from the top. And you can see all of those things at once in the section. It makes a very powerful tool to sort of continue to generate your design moves and begin to evaluate how successful they are. All right. We turn on that sun, and then suddenly I can say, there's a big difference when I move this or that or the other thing around. Let me just move the sun around just a bit here. Let's change where it's at. Right. We can see that there's an opening here. We're starting to get like a little bit of light right in here on this wall, strangely, right? And so, there's these sort of really interesting phenomena that can happen. Now, last but not least, again, I'm just sort of showing this, and you remind me if you want me to show more later on when you get to this point later this week or next week. But beyond just the simple rendered views and things like that, we can begin to speculate with materiality really quickly using generative AI. In this case, I'm using Midjourney, and I fed it just this basic, and it's not this basic screen capture from, you'll recognize this from earlier, right? This is one of the screen captures or one of the perspectives I generated in Rhino. Very simple, soft shadows, a little bit of light. And then I told it, let's render this as a monumental concrete interior with dramatic light rays. It sort of ad libs in places, so I'd probably try to figure out how to give it a better screen capture where it's less ambiguous where the sort of windows and are and what the edges are. But you can see in some cases it generates some of the effects that we're really looking for, right? So if you came in and said, "This is the effect I'm going for," holy cow, right? Like that's unbelievable, right? Like that's like Tadao Ando, like eat your heart out sort of stuff, right? Or Peter Zumthor, right? And so you can quickly, I think, start to generate the sort of atmospherics and spatial material and light effects that you're going for, right? And they're just like quick sketches, but they're quick sketches now with some material rendering added, right? So this didn't take long. Let me just see what I can do. Monumental concrete interior with dramatic light rays. Um, let's see if I say extreme detail. Let's see what it gives me when I say that. Extreme detail of an austere interior in style of Tadao Ando. Let's try that and see what it pops up for the next thing, right? And maybe it's a couple of seconds, maybe it's a couple of minutes, but it'll start to render things out. We'll talk about how we layer these things on with some rendering shaders and then further Photoshop collage. Um, so you can make your own. But I mean, again, this would be like a base render that I'd bring into Photoshop and then start to add things to it, right? Clean some things up if something doesn't make sense. So, in other words, be inclusive in the all of the above approach to leveraging any technology that can help you communicate your intentions. All right. So that was a lot of talking. I apologize for just talking at you, but I wanted to set the table for all the things that we're going to do this week and next, right? We have 2 weeks before we sort of show a bunch of outside people, what we've been working on, right, on July 1st. And so, again, I wanted to sort of, work through all the workflows. As soon as you start showing them sections like this, they're going to be like, oh, okay, all right, let's have a real conversation about this. And some of them might be, this is the cool part, do more of this. And others might be like, hey, clean this up and it's too much going on, make it simple, right? So you'll have to sort of evaluate those things against what your own desires and goals are. But as you always have to do when you get feedback from people. But um, you know, these start to tell a different story than just those axons where we're just like a sort of a helicopter flying over. We can only see a certain number of things, right? We can see the overall massing and shape and how it sort of fits in with plantings and later on in the site with its neighbors. But with these sorts of sections and perspectives, allows us to get inside and start to see what's really special about the architecture and on the inside. And I think that's where you start to make architecture with a capital A, right? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to stop recording.